This is gonna be a very quick video, and judging for people who don't know about the subject, if people who are interested of the concept of the occultism, esotericism, mysticism, and you want to know all the icebergs that you can find about anywhere, the deepest as you could go, right, would be these two. Although there are other things, but like these two are like the big two. And as incorruptible saints from Christianity, specifically the Roman Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church, and the rainbow body of Buddhism, specifically Tibetan Buddhism. So, they're both false. They're not real at all. No, seriously. Let's start with the Buddhist one because many people would defend it a lot harder than the Christian one. That, what I say, it's a technique that many Buddhists achieve that you can reach enlightenment while they're still alive or while they're dying, or in some cases after they die, where their body turns into a little rainbow or a rainbow-like thing and disappear, which is false because many studies show that people actually observe the body, they did not do what they claim to be, and it's been overhyped by people who believe in superstitious nonsense, and it's been heavily contested over time. One best examples is from recently in 2008, and I quote, if they, in addition to spending a lot of quality time with friends and family, they have an opportunity to learn the Buddhism concept of rainbow body, right? And apparently there was a tale by a person who achieved that, most recently called Ayucantro in 1953. And despite that, there is no evidence. In fact, there's evidence that people observe the body and they just decompose like any other body, like seriously. And you know, you can say all you want about their ability, but no. And Ayucatra survived her illness, going on to study to teach her many years and become well known as a living female Buddha, but she died when she was 115 years old. And if you discover and do research about her body, they did not turn into a light of all colors in the end of her life. The body remained there for 2 months before it was cremated. We know what happens when you die, which is nothingness. And even if there is some form of hereafter, where your consciousness and personal identity still preserved in some shape or form, at best there is some physical, natural explanation for it, and not based on the supernatural. The very concept of the rainbow body, where your body disappears until the rise complete force by the complete examination of the death of the person who claimed to be the most recent case, her body did not disappear, did not physically disappear. you know, which is what happens when folklore takes things into a literal statements. Like I said, if you want to learn proof of the rainbow body, there isn't. And all the cases that it's been verified to observe the person who achieved rainbow body, it's just a dead course right away like anybody else. So what about the incorruptible saint? Basically the Christian equivalent or something like that. Instead of turning into eternal rainbow light, your body doesn't rot because you're a saint, you achieve sainthood. An incorruptible body is a whole body or part of the human body that does not decay after death because of some supernatural power giving it immutability. The Catholic Church claims there are many incorruptible bodies that are divine signs of the holiness of the person whose body they used to be. Perhaps they are more likely signs of careful or lucky burial combined with ignorance regarding the factor that effect rate of decay. Some allege cause of incorruptibility border on the possible fraudulent. For example, a television program showed a corpse in a case of a very lifelike woman the narrator said was the preserved body of Saint Teresa of Avila, who died in 1582. The corpse is actually that of Saint Bernadette de Suborio, who died in 1879. A photo of her corpse can be seen on the cover of the book The Incorruptibles, which claimed the body was been preserved intact since 1879, without embedding on the other artificial means. Actually, the face and hands that look so real in the photo are made of wax. The wax was added because of the face was inseminated when the body was first exhumed. Perhaps Saint Peter's corpse should be moved to Madame Tussauds. Some of the alleged saintly incorruptibles have exuded a sweet odor when exhumed. The faithful take this as a sign of divine intervention. The knowledgeable take it as a sign of burning fluids of the ointments. In addition, the numerous saints whose various body parts are kept in regalia and venerated by the faithful as proof of life after death or some god's existence of some things. There are secular examples that are equally dramatic. For example, Vladimir Lenin or the severe head of King Charles I of England was assumed after 165 years, and according to the royal surgeon Sir Henry Hertford, and I quote, the complexion of the skin was dark and discolored. The forehead and temple had lost little of nothing of the muscular substance. The cartilage of the nose was gone, but the left eye in the first moment of exposure was open and full, though vanished almost immediately, and the point bare. So characteristic of this period of the reign of King Charles was perfect. The head was quite wet. It gave a greenish red tinge. The paper to the linen was touched. The back part of the scalp had a remarkable fresh appearance. His hair was thick and appeared nearly black. The preserved head was due to the accident and had more to do with how it was buried at St. George's Chapel in Windsor than any special holiness of Charles I. In 1952, there was a well-publicized case in the Indian Hindu in California who entered Mashanti and whose body was claimed to seem incorruptible. Paramahansa Yogananda was the founder of the Self-Realizing Fellowship who claimed that on March 7, 1952, Paramahansa Yogananda entered Mashanti. His passing was marked by extraordinary phenomena. A notarized statement signed by the director of Forest Land Memorial Park satisfied. No physical disintegration was visible in the body even 20 days after the death. This state of perfect preservation of the body is, so far as we know from maturity annals, an unparallelable one. The Yogananda's body was apparent in a phenomenal state of immutability. The statement of the director of the Forest Law, Harry T. Roy, is accurate but incomplete. Mr. Roy also mentioned that the observed a brown spot in Yogananda's arms after 20 days, a sign that the body was not perfectly preserved. In any case, the SRF's claim that a lack of physical disintegration is an extraordinary phenomenon is misleading. One wonders how much digging into the moderate annals they did. Very little, I imagine. The state of the yogi's body was not unparalleled but common. A typical embalmed body would show no notable desiccation for 1 to 5 months after the burial without the use of respiration or creams to mask odor. According to Jesus Preciado, who has been in the mortuary business for 30 years, in general, the less pronounced the pathology in the time of death, the less notable are the symptoms of necrosis. Some bodies are well preserved for years after burial. Personal correspondence, Mike Drake. Some ordinary extraordinary conditions were preserved for hundreds and even thousands of years. Immutable human bodies are ultimate case of apparent immutability. All human bodies and body parts disintegrate with the time unless they are preserved with inembry fluids or waxes, or by special conditions such as alkaline soil, absence of oxygen, bacteria, worms, heat, light, and the like. There are many cases of such burials in body known as adipoxy. Some courses are saponified, which burial in light impregnated soil converted the body fat into sharp salt that resisted putrefaction. And some courses are preserved by nature, like that of the Otzi man or the Iceman of Bolzano. And despite people claiming that incorruptibility exists, and scientists study these body of the same figure that discover, they use scale perpetuators, sometimes natural conditions significantly slow decay, and the synthetic course were just replaced again and again with newly deceased ones. And the Catholic Church now virtually, but now officially, abandoned the notion of incorruptibility. It no longer accepts physical preservation as one of the true miracles required before a saint can be recognized by the Pope. Still, suppression of sense of astonishment is difficult in the preserver as saint preserves body. So there is, again, bullshit statements that people trying to convince. Okay? And even when you see perfectly preserved human body, as she died only a few hours ago, some saints, right? The body was assuming centuries old. How can this be? How can this body be proven incorruptible by decay by ravage of time? According to the Catholic Church, such incorruptibility is a miracle. A person who dies and proven incorruptible can thus qualify as a saint, even though, again, they virtually but now officially abandoned the concept, considered not legitimate anymore. And there are quite few alleged examples of this. We like assume are best known, but first let's exactly what the church criteria are for incorruptibility. It means that the body does not deposed after death. Miraculous Maronite explained by natural process, even though we can look at the Otzi man, and he predates all Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, and Islam. So the body had to remain flexible. It's supposed to be indistinguishable from the sleep. It can't dry out like the Egyptian mummy and be or still. The body also must not have been involved or otherwise preserved. The most famous is Saint Pedate, currently on display in Saint Chapel Saint Pedate in France. She died 1879. And the story she discovered to be incorruptible of free odor. However, two doctors swore a statement their examination of the body, clearly describing a partially modified corpse, describing the whole body as shivering, saying the lower parts of the body had turned black, the nose was dilated and shrunk, and that the whole body was rigid and sounded like cardboard when struck. The body was prepared and reburied in a sealed casket where it was dug up again in 1919. Another doctor filled the following report, which I quote, "The body is practically mummified, covered with patches of mildew and quite a notable layer of salt, which appeared to be calcium salt. The skin will disappear some places, but still preserving most parts of the body." And the third and final examination in 1925, it was not blackish tint to the face and sunken eyes and nose should make an unpleasant impression of the public. So the decision was made to display the corpse with a wax mask. This right the photo to see at the internet of Saint Pedanda's beautiful incorruptible corpse or a wax mask placed on an obviously mummified body. The description of her condition openly violated all requirements of incorruptibility by the church. Yes, Saint Pedanda is the most official example of miraculous incorruptibility by Catholics. When you think about it, if a saint dies and God decides that his body should be incorruptible, you think it should remain absolutely perfect, like, Sleepy Beauty or something like that. But it's just another nun who's supposedly incorruptible body still on display. She died 1463, and although I couldn't find any documentation of all that pertained to the circumstances of burial and exhumation, the story goes that she was buried without a coffin and was assumed only 18 days later to a strong sweet scent coming from her grave. More about that in a moment. Her body is displayed in the Chapel of Port Class in Bologna, Italy, in state position inside a glass case. As you can see from many photos on the internet, the body is completely mummified, black and shivered, can be no definition be called incorrupt, yet she is called just that anyway. It's under defiance of the abandoningly obvious. Saint Silva was a young man said to be killed for his faith in the year 350, and his body is on display in Dubrovnik, Croatia, repelled by the fresh-looking gas of his throat said to have been caused to death. The body appears to be perfect in sculptural effigy. Saint Silva's actually remains are said to be contained with a box below the effigy, but it does not display significant to display to this faithful, and many come away with the focus of what they think is the actual body, but in reality is not. If he is uncorrupted as the church claims, why display an effigy instead of the body? Padre Pio, the 20th century priest famous for his stigmata, is also on the church list of incorruptibles. However, according to church on record, his body was involved with the fulfillment upon death. Even so, his examination 4 years later remained what described as partial skeletal, and morticians were unable to restore the face to be viewable conditions, so Padre Pio is displayed today in a lifelike silicone mask. Incorruptible bodies, when assumed, are often said to be accompanied by a sweet odor with Catholic called the odor of sanctity. The odor is also said to come from stigmata on living saints. Some say are said to have exuded this odor after death. Of course, the obvious explanation for such smell would be embalming fluid. However, modern embalming fluids basically formulate mixture, also said to have a strong, unpleasant, like gasoline odor. Therefore, most manufactured masks the smell with perfume additive. Historically, sweet-smelling ointments were used on corpses to counter the smell of decomposition, and many such ointments were known to have contained guaiacol, an effective preservative made from the beechwood tar, similar to creosote. So, dig up a body, find any of the same preservation, you're likely to smell a strong sweet odor. Evidence of embodied or odor making is better explanation to spell the supernatural odor of sanctity, or rainbow body, or the mashabanti. The best example of natural incorruptibility comes from a pet bugs of Northern Europe. About 1,000 individuals were being exhumed from the bugs, where a unique combination of cold condition and chemical process preserved the soft tissue. Most of these come from a Celtic Iron Age. Some are far older, the oldest being a Colberch woman who is 5,500 years old. In bug bodies, peat acid actually dissolves the bones but leaves the soft tissue pliable, like rubber. Though stained brown and actually tan in leather, technically these bodies made the Catholic criteria, but their calves pagans, so far better than any of the dry mummified corpses that the church claimed. Why are their bug people not considered saints? At least their body actually do remain flexible. The church probably stated that the natural chemical process counts in body, which of course it does, but at least this is a natural process, not a deliberate human body has been happened so many in the so-called miraculous Catholic incorruptibles. Most recent of these cases is Hampo Lama Itiklalov, a Buddhist monk who died in Russian Mongol territory of Buryatia in 1927, was exhumed in 2002. In his own last request, his condition was described by a monk and pathology and attended as someone who died only 36 hours before. A video shows that it looks to be a well-preserved mummy, but hardly that of someone who died 36 hours before. His body is on display in the open air and is claimed to remain pliable, the claim which is untested. Despite a Roman documentary movie about finding no explanation, the monk claimed to the contrary. The pathologist's own report found the body to have been preserved with bromide salts. Incorruptible had also instructed that his body being packed in salt, another way to help prevent the decomposition by observing moisture away from the body. It's interesting that in life, Itogo actually have a degree in medicine and have written a Buddhist encyclopedia on pharmacology. Buddhists might allow practice self-mummification. Some Japanese monks used to prepare themselves for self-mummification, though technique called sokushinbutsu. They ate a sustained diet of nuts and seeds for 1,000 days to get rid of all their fat. And then they spent the next 1,000 days eating only bark, roots, and drinking the tea of a poisonous tree called the urushi, in an effort to make their body both dehydrated and toxic to parasites. Finally, they would place themselves inside a stone tomb, ringing a bell once each day. When the bell failed to ring, the other monks would seal the tomb, wait another 1,000 days, and then open it out to find out whether the monk had mummified. Only 20 such monks were successfully mummified in this manner. The rest decompose normally. Even this number is impressive given that the internal organs remain, which are a prime source of bacteria that contribute to decomposition. Tests of the mummies have revealed toxic levels of arsenic, which is another empalement agent. Together with the lack of body fat pre-existing dehydration, monks practice sakushinbutsu actually have a reasonable chance of mummification if their tomb was well sealed and conditions were dry. Hampu ala Itenko's own technique of using bromide salt and salt packing appears to be scientifically updated form of Sukushinbutsu. Well, you couldn't call these monks incorruptible any more than you could use these terms to describe the Catholic saints who were obviously mummified. The mummification is the natural aspect process that happens to the body under the right conditions. There's nothing miraculous about a natural aspect process. I suppose some people claim that in some cases decomposition had taken place instead of mummification, thus the miracle. So what? Leaving a few strands of a beef jerky stretched over the bowls is the best of the miracle created super being was able to make up? I'm not convinced. And a skeptical Catholic wouldn't be either. Incorruptibles shouldn't be me incorruptible. The course need to be flexible and lifelike, as if asleep. We never see anything remotely like that. There are no verifiable, viewable example of supernatural incorruptibility whatever the planet, and no reason to think there are ever been. And even you go the deepest, bottom of the barrel, hidden knowledge of esotericism, occultism, and mysticism, like pattern manipulation, which is a fancy form of sacred geometry where you can manipulate, people's observation, while reality is just easy psychological trick to manipulate people, like how dictators do to convince people that migrants are evil. Or fractulation, which is the same thing, but like reality, man. Well, 9 times out of them they're tripping balls. And like the Akashic records, learn everything. It was created by a Freemason, which according to the Akashic record, it has secret knowledge of everything. Atlantis is real, which is not, and has a lot of racist, anti-Semitic elements in the Akashic records. So yeah. So that's, and even like Spinoza pantheism has been debunked as well using mathematical logic of all things. Even though Spinoza used geometry to justify his philosophy. So, and Carl Jung's psychoanalysis of archetypes also been debunked because humanity is more fluid than just solid one-dimensional footnotes. So yeah, thank you for watching this video. Bye.